And hello, everybody. Welcome back to this week's edition of the International Cannabis Conversation. I'm your global cannabis tour guide, Chris Day, co-founder of the Global Cannabis Network Collective, and always thankful every week to trichomes.com for allowing us to take this global journey looking into the expansion and growth of the legal cannabis markets worldwide. Today, I'm really pleased to have a new friend to the ICC family and community, Arjun Rajyagor. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Sana Life Science in the UK. He is a former Boston Consulting Group person, spent some time at Goldman Sachs, sold some water on the BBC Junior Apprentice, and won doing so. So we're going to have to spend some time talking about that. But Arjun, welcome to the podcast. So glad you're here with us.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. Great to be here and love the work that you guys are doing.
Appreciate that. For us, it's a lot of fun doing the work when you're getting a chance to also sort of virtually travel the globe and hear what people are up to. It's not so hard. So thanks for coming in. Before we jump into Sana Life Science, when I was doing my homework and reading up about you and Sana, you sort of have to take a pause and go, okay, so this guy sold water on the BBC Junior Apprentice and somehow convinced people by selling water that he should be designated the winner. How the heck did that happen? What was that? Sorry, we'll get into cannabis shortly, but I need to know.
Let's go way back. So this is now over 10 years ago. So The Apprentice aired in the UK in 2010. I was 17 at the time that I took part. There were 36,000 applicants for my first season. And it was an amazing experience. Really a baptism of fire of business as a teenager. You kind of get forced and dropped into these situations to solve business problems with very little business acumen behind you, I guess.
Yeah.
But it really, really reinforced to me that kind of the entrepreneurial journey was always going to be my plan, and enabled me to kind of do lots of different things in a very safe but stressful environment.
Yeah.
And I made some great network out of it as well. Like I still communicate with my fellow contestants, and Alan Sugar is still an advisor to me personally. So it's been a great experience.
That's phenomenal. If The Apprentice, I've never seen the way in which they aired The Apprentice in the UK, but if it is remotely like how it was done in the United States, I mean, certainly trial by fire is the main takeaway. And if you survive it and can get good skills out of that, it certainly probably sets you up for the same types of trial by fire that a lot of us as entrepreneurs in the cannabis space get to witness, right? It's a constant
Exactly,
pivot.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a constant pivot. It's constant reaction to everything that's happening around you and what's happening with legislation and regulatory changes in this industry. But when you kind of look back at that time on The Apprentice, I think having been through that experience made me want more of that trial by fire and kind of being dropped into the depths of something really complicated that I knew nothing about and wanting to be able to solve problems in that space. And that's kind of where my career took me in the end.
Right. I ended up in cannabis in a similar fashion. I spent a couple of decades in ad agencies, and frankly, even though it was always a bit of a challenge, it became redundant. And I was looking for an industry where I could make a positive impact on the world. I could do new things, and it was complicated. And cannabis checks all of those boxes in a myriad of ways.
It does
right?
indeed.
It's like if you really like to do things that are difficult and complex, but still do great things for the world, the cannabis industry is one of those for sure. And I know, making a positive impact and really helping patients and the supply chain of cannabis overall is somewhat at the heart of what Sana Life Science does. So let's pivot and talk a little bit about the company. Tell us what Sana is all about and what you're trying to achieve.
Sure. So I'll take you back and take you through the story a little bit. So obviously we had The Apprentice. I was running a technical solutions business at the time. As you mentioned, I went to work for Goldman Sachs as a full stack engineer, and then to the Boston Consulting Group where I was a tech strategy consultant. And Sana really began at BCG. So my business partner and co-founder, Ben Hamburger, we were working late one night on a project for an unnamed client. We were in the office at about 3 a.m. and we were like, why are we solving these problems for other people? We'd much rather have problems that we enjoy solving, that we want to solve and have a passion for, and really feel like we're benefiting people and the community at a wider level. So where we really started was medicinal cannabis in the world and as a medication is shown to have efficacy and is shown to be helpful for people. But it's almost ridiculous from our perspective that your accessibility to that medication is driven by where you live.
Right.
So if you were an MS patient in the UK, for example, having access to cannabis is incredibly difficult, but it's well recognized around the world that MS patients do take cannabis as a way to solve the issues that they have on a day-to-day basis, be that pain, spasticity, other things that they deal with. So we really started from a base of how do we drive sustainable scale in medicinal cannabis prescriptions in the UK, considering we have a legislative structure in place for medical cannabis prescribing, and there are patients here who really need it. And for me, that personally hit home as well, because my mum has been on opioids for 15 years. And I've seen her go from the person she was at that point in time to who she is now. And a lot of that has been driven by the medication that she's been having to take. And I've seen such good information and good evidence of people being deprescribed opioids and flipping onto cannabis-based medicines and having a real impact on their lives, not only from the way that they deal with their symptoms, but just their overall quality of life. So that was really kind of the impetus for us to start investigating this in a bit more detail. Now, as management and strategy consultants, we took the approach that we take to everything, which is look at a problem, look at a space, identify the pain points within that space, and then start tackling each of them independently. And where we really started is the legislative and regulatory structure in the UK, where cannabis is an unlicensed special, is actually something that is good, because unlicensed specials are a well-trodden pathway in the UK. It's something that has been prescribed and within that regulatory space for a long time. And clinicians in this country are comfortable doing so. But why haven't they prescribed cannabis? Why is cannabis only prescribed through cannabis clinics today? And why is the number of patients in the UK below 1,000? Like, these things don't quite add up to us. And what we realize is the big gap within kind of prescribing in the UK, and the reason that clinicians especially find it quite difficult to engage with cannabis prescribing, is that the data that exists for them to feel comfortable prescribes, not only from like a safety and toxicity perspective, which we can say cannabis has been consumed for thousands of years. Safety and toxicity is one of those things that people kind of assume is there. But when you start thinking about efficacy, and especially efficacy within specific indications that those specialists work within, that's where the gap has really been to try and drive that scale. So that's kind of how we started tackling the problem space. So Sana Life Science is actually comprised of two divisions. So we have Sana Healthcare, which is our medicinal cannabis importation and distribution business, where we hold our own MHRA and Home Office licenses to import and distribute cannabis into the UK. And our focus there is, as I said, products with data. So we work very heavily with our partners in Israel. So we're partnered with Canasol Analytics, which is Professor Dedi Miri, so one of the world's leading R&D scientists in cannabis medicine, and our CMO, so Dr. Steve Hagioff, used to be chairman of the BMA here in the UK, and was integral in the policy change in the 90s that allowed companies like GW Pharmaceuticals to exist, and has been involved with cannabis prescribing policy for a long time. It's using those kind of key opinion leaders and access to 20 years of Israeli prescribing data and clinical data that is now popping up in pockets around the world to really engage with clinicians to drive scripts and to see cannabis treated as an other medicine. It's not separate. It should just be another tool in their armory. The other side of Sana is the side that started a little bit earlier because we were not waiting for licenses. And as we were going through that licensing process, we realized that we had built such expertise within the cannabis space and such knowledge that we needed to be able to leverage that in other ways. So we started Sana Lifestyle, which is our consumer goods focused distribution business. Where we predominantly hold a range of CBD brands that we distribute into UK retail and European online. So we hold brands from the US, CB Distillery, Kanuka, and we hold brands from the UK and Europe, so 4-5 CBD and Provocan. But we also hold our own brands where we've taken brand licenses from partners in the UK So, for example, we've partnered with Eve, which is a leading mattress company here, to launch Eve CBD. And the kind of the rationale behind our thinking.
I wanted to interject right there because it's
I went off on a
fine.
bit of a diatribe.
You were going, and I love it, and I didn't want to jump in because it was good and well articulated and constructed. But you just mentioned that you're tied into a mattress company, and so I wanted to look at that because when we talked prior, right? I love the fact that you've created this true distribution network, that you're using research from around the world. A lot of countries just refuse to do that, right? If it wasn't done in their country, it must not be any good. Drives me crazy.
Tell me about it. We're in an international world. Chris.
I know. And that's the whole theme of everything that I do with my company, the map on the wall behind you. We need to learn from those types of things. But a constant challenge is, even if you have the product, even if we can convince the doctors to prescribe it, like communicating to people on the consumer side what it is you do, the way you communicate that through marketing communications is so restricted in how you do it. And so some people have been working to find creative ways to solve that problem. And I have to assume that the only reason you might be working with mattresses is to convey some of that.
Yes, definitely. So the UK is no exception to that rule. CBD especially, we can make no claims on CBD products. We have to be very careful in how we market them. There are very limited options in how we market them and where we can market them. There's no PPC, for example, in the UK on CBD brands. We're not allowed to advertise on Facebook. So we're quite limited in what we can do in terms of being able to build a brand presence and market those brands into the consumer space. And what we realized when we started thinking about this is CBD is known to have efficacy in certain areas. And one of those areas is sleep. Now, we can't explicitly make that claim.
Yeah, we're not allowed on this conversation. We're absolutely not saying that it might actually help you with anything, except that some people might have said at some point that once upon a time it did. I mean, did for me yesterday, but we can't
it
actually
is reported to.
Yes,
let's put it that way.
That's exactly right. So
it is reported to help.
Got to keep us protected here.
Indeed, yes. So it is reported to help with sleep. So from our perspective, we were like, how do we convey that to consumers without saying that word? And the way that we kind of approached it was brand licensing and brand extension is a nice way to do that, because people associate given brands with given sectors, and a mattress brand you instinctively kind of associate with sleep. So seeing that brand on a CBD product, you would instinctively assume as a consumer that product is for sleep, whether it says so or not.
Right.
Even though it doesn't.
Of course not. And even the politicians, should they choose to try, might learn that sometimes things said to be true might actually be. So, maybe we should all send them mattresses. I don't know. So, yeah, I love the creativity behind it. I get a chance to look at a lot of different markets around the world. And of course, where I sit here in the United States, every state even is a little bit different. So I've sat on dozens of panels over the years and on marketing within the cannabis space. And the first 15 to 20 minutes of any panel almost always is otherwise very talented and wonderful professionals complaining about all the things they cannot do and all the things that people say they shouldn't do. And I want to just sort of record that, put it on high speed and say, okay, this is the first 20 minutes that waste all of our time. Let people listen to that on speed.
We all know what we can't do.
And then jump into what can we do? What are the ways that we can work and can communicate with people within these frameworks?
And it goes back to what you were saying before, right? We're problem solvers by nature, and therefore we like complicated problems because it allows us to find inventive solutions.
Yeah, and it also allows us to highlight the lunacy, which is also fun. So anyway, I love that sidebar and being able to sort of highlight the challenges that exist, but also the creative solutions that exist. As you've been looking at on the medicinal side, as you've been looking at this notion of really informing practitioners about how cannabis works, efficacy studies, quality of life studies. What have you found to be the greatest barrier to getting people to prescribe more when this information is available? And how are you looking to solve that problem?
So you made a good point there, which is when this information is available. So when Ben and I started this 2 years ago, we were under the impression that we were going to start a business, have all of these licenses, and then start engaging with cannabis companies around the world and be inundated with data that we can use to engage with clinicians. What we've realized in the last 2 years is very, very few pockets of that data exist today, especially when you start applying the filter of pure clinical data that is collected in a clinical setting as part of a phase 2 efficacy trial, for example. We know of maybe 3 or 4 companies around the world, one of which is GW, that holds that kind of data. Now, when you talk about the kind of the wider data collection, so anecdotal data and observational data that has been collected, Israel is an absolute hotspot for this information. And with 20 years of prescribing, as I mentioned earlier, we have lots of information that we can leverage. And engaging with clinicians has been tricky. And kind of the biggest challenge we're facing is there's one part around the data wasn't collected here, but we kind of overcome that because of the fact that this has been standard of care in a recognized market for a very long time. And the fact that we engage with clinicians through key opinion leaders, through our medical partners who have a recognition in that industry, and they are recognized to be people that you should be listening to, is kind of how we're trying to tackle that. We're also engaging with existing groups here in the UK. So we have the Medical Cannabis Clinician Society, which is where people who are prescribing cannabis in the UK can be part of. We have other industry councils that we're part of that we engage clinicians and patients through those. But fundamentally, our engagement is indexed around the fact that we can basically prove that these products have worked for other people over a long period of time that are facing this indication. Mm-hmm. And that is centric to what we do, because indication specificity has kind of been the one thing that has been missing, we think, from this market, at least up until now. There are products that are prescribed cross-indication, and by the nature of full spectrum flowers and oils, we can kind of see why that works, right? A flower can be shown to have effects to help you sleep and to relax you and to reduce anxiety because it has 100 chemicals in it. They're all doing slightly different things. But when you start getting into the next level of detail in the data, you can really identify that this particular product has shown really good efficacy within this particular indication to help people to sleep when they have MS, for example. And it's finding that kind of correlation between indication and product that enables us to engage with clinicians in the right way, in a way that they're used to being engaged with.
Mm-hmm. I think, on the podcast here, out of the last 5 or 6, I know I've had versions of this conversation from different parts of the world, at least in 3 of those episodes. So, one, that's telling me I need to get you all together. But 2, it's also interesting that people forget, especially those of us who have been really immersed in the cannabis industry over the last, say, 5 or 6 years, that it hasn't been all that long since this plant has reemerged as something that isn't just terrible and evil, and we all should be thrown in jail for it, right? So the sophistication of the science in such a brief period of time, I would say, is actually quite impressive. And so the fact that we can go and find these studies, that the information is out there, and that there are highly qualified scientists, clinicians, experienced health practitioners who are available to talk about this, shows me that over the next 6 to 10 years, I think all of these questions will be sufficiently dealt with. And hopefully then people can shake propaganda and focus on facts. At least that's my wish for the industry.
I couldn't agree more. A large part of the challenge with clinicians is overcoming the stigma that is associated with cannabis as a plant and as a recreational drug that people have been using, and has the bad rep that is associated with that. And that's where we believe the data really changes the conversation entirely, because we're showing on paper with empirical evidence that these things are medicines and that they can be used as such.
Right. Yeah, one quick story. I was on and I'll keep names and exactly who and where out of it, because it was a online virtual webinar type panel with about 15 life scientist researchers from Scandinavia and the UK. All of them had various research projects focused on mostly the central nervous system. And they were working on both psychedelics and the endocannabinoids, and the endocannabinoid system, rather. It was fun to watch because several of them identified themselves as sort of being there in the closet, but excited to talk about it and to talk about their work and what they're learning. And I think those types of conversations where people realize this isn't something that you have to hide results about. This is like legit science now, folks. And it has been for a very, very long time. But I think they felt like they were being a bit rebellious, and it felt kind of cool to be solving the world's problems this way. And so I, of course, encourage them to publish their work and talk more broadly about it, because until that sort of odd fear of just being judged for something that you're actually helping people live better and healthier lives.
Could not agree more.
That is your commitment to the human race. Go do that.
Exactly. People need to shout about it more, to be honest. Like, there is interesting stuff happening in this industry, especially from a scientific research perspective, all around the world. But we just don't hear about it enough, I think. And that needs to be a bit more vocal. And what you were saying earlier about the fact that we're 6 years into this industry and the scientific bounds that we've leaped already have been impressive. And if you look back at the last 18 months of what the world has been through, we've shown that consumers as well can get engaged with clinical data as long as it's put in a way people can understand. We've all had to learn what an R number is over the last year. And it shows that something that would have normally taken 10 years to develop a vaccine in a pharmaceutical environment was done in 6 months. That is proving that the world is moving on from phase 3 and phase 4 RCT data to prove that products are safe and efficacious and that can be used to help people. So people need to almost leverage the momentum that has been built through the pandemic to some extent within the clinical community and the data collection community to say, we've proven that we can collect data cleanly and in a safe way in a shorter period of time and prove that products work. Let's use that in other ways.
Right. Yeah, I love that. We have also seen the opposite, which is the danger of continued propaganda and misinformation to undermine it, right? And so we continue to fight that fight and that balance. As a marketer who likes to use the powers for good of communication, I think certainly in my lifetime, I'm never going to run out of things to do and counter. And for your company and trying to really consolidate and create a distribution plan for great products from around the world that really help people, I think you've got some pretty amazing opportunities as well. And so as we sort of look, I always ask at the end of the show the crystal ball question, So if you're looking into your crystal ball and you say, hey, 12 months or 2 or 3 years out, this is where we're hoping Sana Life Science is and what we're doing. What does that look like for you?
So 12 months, 18 months, 3 years, I guess the aim is the same, right? The aim is to help people with efficacious medication and to find the right medications for the right indications and to use data to do so. So for us, it's about launching efficacious products that help people within indications and to continue doing that over that period. We don't want to just launch one. We want to help people across the board. And cannabis is so diverse. There's so much in that plant that we can learn from and derive and isolate and combine. And so much science that is there to be done that we think that this could literally be a game changer.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. And I know many of our audience also agree with you. And for those that don't, what I can encourage you to do is continue to look at the studies and listen to the science and talk to the healthcare practitioners around the world who are learning more, because those types of results do matter and are indeed a world-changing opportunity for people with a lot of different ailments. I'm not a believer in the hype, for example, around CBD, where it's the clear solution to every single illness in the universe. But you know what? It has proven efficacious, as do other cannabinoids in the plant. And so, we look forward to watching Sana Life Science grow. I look forward to talking to you again in the near future about what you're up to and hearing more of your stories. So, Arjun, thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. And if you haven't subscribed yet, quit stalling, do it. Just hit the button, subscribe, so you can hear the International Cannabis Conversation every week. Thanks again, all, and thanks, Arjun.